pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Do you know how many miles it is?
I don't know.
3.1. 3.1?
It's a 5K.
Okay, well, I'm out for this year.
Yeah, me too. Okay, it's my pleasure now to, I'm sorry. One last thing. Is there anybody here who doesn't have one of these little gadgets to get into the computer for attendance at these meetings? If so, there's a form here, very simple. You fill out and the senior center will make you one. Now, on to the business of the meeting. Richard DeSorgher is here, member of the Historical Commission, as I said, and also succeeded our beloved Frank Lord, who for years built the idea of the teacher at the little old schoolhouse that was brought up from down south and is now up across the street from the town hall. Richard has succeeded Frank as the instructor. You see, I don't know how many hundreds of kids every year learn something about school business in the old days. And actually, when we had a trip there a brief time ago, quite a few of us, it turned out, had attended schools with more than one class in the same classroom in our early days. I know in my own case, I had the same teacher for the first 4 years, and thank goodness she was a great teacher. But the school was so small that we were all in one room, and she advanced finally when we became fourth graders, and it was just one class per room. Richard, if there's anything I've forgotten, please fill us in, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. I'm going to try to focus on this historic 1831 one-room schoolhouse. And you might say 1831, well, that really doesn't sound all that old. Because if you look around the surrounding towns, if you go over to Sandwich or you go to Barnstable or Falmouth, you see homes that were built in the 1700s. And the reason is Mashpee was a Native American and Wampanoag district that was here. And the Wampanoags didn't build the traditional English-style homes that you see in Sandwich or Barnstable. Instead, they moved. So in the summertime, they were down closer to the beach in the Weetus. And there's a great example, if you've not seen a Weetu, in the Wampanoag Museum on Route 130, is a great example of a Weetu. And then in the winter time, they would move more inland in more long houses. So you didn't have the older houses. So when you see something like 1831, this is one of the oldest buildings in Mashpee today. So let me actually start by talking a little bit about a guy you know very well, who was very active here with the men's club. And I was born and brought up in the town of Medfield, about 18 miles southwest of Boston, and I taught in the high school there U.S. history for 35 years. And one of the things I did, I was also the town historian in Medfield, and one of the things we did is we took all the third graders on a bus tour all around town, different historic sites. So when I came here to Mashpee and I joined the Historical Commission, because there was a vacancy, Frank Lord had moved to the Mayflower facility over in Yarmouth, and he had stepped down from the Historical Commission. And so that vacancy, I sat in a meeting and I was appointed to, I can't say replace Frank because no one can replace Frank, but I took his seat, so to speak. But he was still running the schoolhouse. He was still the schoolmaster. And when he found out that I also used to take all the third graders around because every year Frank would bring all the third graders in from the Quashnet School and tour them. He said, wait a minute, you got to come with me and help me out. And so that's how I first got involved with the one-room schoolhouse. And then, sadly, as you know, Frank's health went downhill, and then COVID hit. We have, after Frank died, the Historical Commission, this plaque is now in the schoolhouse dedicated to the honor of Frank for all the efforts that he did, not only with the Historical Commission, but in particularly with the one-room schoolhouse, because he was a driving force, as I'll get into a little later, that really helped save the one-room schoolhouse. So let's start a little bit with the history of the building itself, the 1831 schoolhouse. Now, originally, it was located down in South Mashpee, let me actually stop just for a second, because before this schoolhouse came in, there was no school here in Mashpee. And what education took place was simply Wampanoags that went to homes and taught kids out of the home. And the Wampanoags kept petitioning the state legislature over and over again, numerous petitions. Can you please get us a school building so we can educate our kids? And no attention was paid until finally in 1831, the legislature in their generosity votes $400 to build two schools in the town of Mashpee. One in South Mashpee, which was this school, and one in North Mashpee, roughly where the town hall is today, and I'll get to that in a second. So those are the two schools. So in 1831, we now have a school building. And if you're familiar at all, you know, as if you were going down towards South Cape Beach, right in the intersection of Great Oak and Red Brook is where this school was located. So if this was Red Brook Road, this would be Great Oak heading down towards South Cape Beach, and the schoolhouse was located right there. So that's the location of the school. The other school was the North School. And the North School is located where Town Hall is today. As you can see, it was a little bit bigger than the 1831 South School, a little bell tower on the top. And this lasted from 1831 up until 1890, when it too was too small, and they were looking to build a larger school. I consider myself, I've only been here in Mashpee 7 years. My wife and I, when I retired, after I worked for a little bit at the John F. Kennedy Library in the education department in there for a couple of years, and then we moved down here to Mashpee. And I found, even though I'm a Washoe, I found that I did have a tie here to Mashpee. And what happened was, after I got on the Historical Commission, I was looking to do some research, so I said, where are the early town reports? As you know, every year a town puts out an annual town report that says all the business that took place, the birth, the death, the different departments would respond. Well, they said, well, we're missing, Mashpee becomes a town in 1870, they said, we're missing all the reports from 1870 to 1910. Town Hall doesn't know where they are. They're not in the archives. They're missing. I said, what do you mean they're missing? And I said, wait a minute, I know from doing research in Medfield that a town also sends a copy into the State House library for keeping. So I got on the phone, I called up the State House Library, and I said, they said, yep, we got the reports. They said, but they're in real fragile condition. You can't Xerox them. But if you come with your iPhone and you line up, you can take the individual pages and then I can copy them off on a printer, bound them, and now Mashpee will be able to have its town reports that were missing. So I went in, 970 pages later, standing over each page in the library taking the picture. Now, my last name is kind of an odd one, DeSorgher. It's D-E and then the capital S-O-R-G-H-E-R. It's actually Belgian in origin, and we're always told that we were the only DeSorghers in the United States. So I'm not reading these pages, but I'm lining them up, and about a couple of hours in, all of a sudden I see this D-E capital S. And what? And I look down, and I see the name Mary Lee DeSorgher in the town report of Mashpee. That's my great-grandmother. What we didn't know is that she was a teacher down here from 1887 to 1890. Here's the story. Now, my great-grandfather, John, was an apprentice ship's captain on a ship coming from Belgium. They came into Boston Harbor, and he jumped ship. So don't report me. I may be illegal. He jumped ship, and he stays, and he marries this Mary, last name Lee, of Connecticut. Now, they have one child. Now, he was a builder, a carpenter. He built a lot of the three-deckers in Boston. And they had one child, my grandfather. And when he finally got enough money building a number of three-deckers in Boston, he said, I want to bring my mother over from Belgium. So he brings the mother over. Unfortunately, the mother and Mary Lee don't get along. And Mary Lee says to him, either she goes or I go. And he says, I can't send my mother back. She takes my 8-year-old grandfather, says, see you later, and leaves. Now, she was a school teacher. The only history we had, we thought she went to the town of Franklin, which she later did. We never knew she came down here to Mashpee in 1887. Why? We have no idea. In talking to Earl Mills, and many of you may know Earl Mills, who is the son of Mashpee, the most knowledgeable person, and still into his 90s, his memory is incredible. He said probably the house that's still next to Town Hall, they used to rent rooms out to the teachers. And also the Dorcas Gardner house that was kind of across the street, no longer there, they also rented rooms out. So my grandmother, great-grandmother, and my grandfather probably stayed right next to the school for those 3 years. She taught here, and you can see she taught summer school, earned a whopping $10 for summer school, and then she later, for the year, earned $89 teaching, and it would have been almost 99 or 100% Wampanoag population, so probably my grandfather would have been the only Caucasian going to school with Wampanoag kids for those 3 years. My father never knew this? Wouldn't you think his father would say, hey, when I was a kid, you know, I was down, I went to school in the Cape, I went to school with Native Americans, nothing. Or his grandmother saying, hey, I was down the Cape, I taught there, nothing. Well, our family never knew that. It was a total surprise. And then in 1890, she actually becomes the last teacher to teach in the original North School, because they tore it down, they built a bigger one. So to finish the story, in 1890, she does go to Franklin. My grandfather actually goes off into the Spanish-American War, and we never knew any of this. So in 1900, the mother dies. Now, Mary Lee has been gone for 13 years. She comes back, knocks on the door, I'm back. Moves back in. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Live happily ever after with a 13-year gap in between. So you want to talk about odd families, I have it. So people say to me, you're a washer. I say, wait a minute. I can go all the way back to 1887 to 1890 when my grandmother taught school here and my grandfather went to school in what was the North School. So that's a little bit of history of my connection to that. The North School, that original was torn down. They built a wooden building that was larger, and that stayed until the 1930s and during the Depression, and that was too small, and they needed a new school. And there's you recognize Town Hall, and it became the CMUG Davis School. It was the new school, that third school on that site that was now the school that held, there was no high school, so it held grades 1 through 8. And there's a great story why it's called the CMUG Davis School. I'm sure many of you heard that. CMUG Davis was a very wealthy Bostonian, had a huge mansion in Roxbury. And in the early 1900s, in an open motor car, he had a beautiful summer home in Falmouth. And he was motoring through Mashpee on his way to his summer home in Falmouth. It was a very windy day, and had one of those taller hats on. And the wind blew his hat off into this field. And this young Wampanoag boy ran after the hat, grabbed the hat, ran up and gave it to Mr. CMUG Davis, who was very impressed, reaches into his pocket to give the kid some money as a reward. And the kid says, no, 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 no. I was always taught you don't get paid for having good manners. Mr. Davis kind of remembered that. When Mr. Davis dies in the early 1930s, in his will, he left the town of Mashpee $57,000 to be used each year in the schools of Mashpee to give kids a monetary reward for those who had good manners. That still takes place today. That still happens every year. Look in your town report and you can see which kids got the award for having good manners. Well, as you know, the Great Depression was horrible economically, especially here. Mashpee was the poorest of the poor. And we had no money to rebuild the North School. And so here's this $57,000 sitting in an account. And so they went through the courts, and they were able to legally take out $33,000 of that to build what became the CMUG Davis School, which is why they named it after him, because he's the one that had donated that money. He gave money to a lot of different things, but he never forgot that incident where the young boy refused the money because of good manners. So this becomes the third school on that site, but that's why it's called the CMUG Davis School. Okay, let's get back to the school we still have, and that's our South School, 1831. It remained a school till 1900. Those of you, how many were on that trip that went inside the school? So some of you know it was very small inside, and so they said, we need a bigger school. So they go to town meeting, and the voters vote $1,000 to build a new, larger South School. Well, then you have the town of Sandwich, had a school right on our border, right by Wakeby Pond, that they had closed, the so-called Wakeby School in Sandwich. And they said, look, we'll sell you our school for $200. So Mashpee said, great deal, we're going to save $800 on the deal. And so they buy the Sandwich School, and then by using logs and oxen, they actually roll the school all the way through Mashpee, right down into South Mashpee, and you can see here's the original 1831 school, and now across the street on Red Brick Road, this is the Sandwich School. This is the new Sandwich School, which was much larger. So this becomes the school from 1901 until 1906. It only lasts 5 years because a number of families that lived there moved. And so Mashpee, being financially prudent, said, wait a minute, maybe it makes more sense, take what remaining kids are, send them up to the North School, and we'll close this school, and then we'll just have the one school. All kids in town will go to the one school. And so that's what they did in 1906. This school then gets sold a few years later to the Haynes family for $450 as a residence. And if you drive by, it is still a residence today on 65 Red Brick Road. That is the Sandwich School moved to Mashpee. You can see the same peak of it is still there. Okay, so now our school, right there, what happens to it? It's no longer a school, so we sell it to the Baptists for $22. And the Baptists use it as a youth chapel. And the name now becomes, and this is the original sign which we have in the schoolhouse, Aquay Chapel. So it becomes known as the Aquay Chapel. And it's the Aquay Chapel. The Baptists have it from 1906 up until 1953. And as you know, if you look, you can see there's a chimney. And the chimney's kind of in line with this first window. And so the stove, the wood-burning stove, would have been pretty much in the middle of the school, which makes sense because you want to heat, the kids that sit all around it. Well, when the Baptists come in, now in the middle of this hall they want to use is this stove that's there. And so they decide, well, we'll move the stove and chimney to the outer wall. And so they tear down the woodshed, the original woodshed that was there, and they put the chimney and the stove on that outer wall. And what they do with the door, this is the doorway, the side door that you guys came in. They boarded this in and they put an organ here for music. And we know the work was done in 1916 because once they boarded this door in, you needed a way to get into school. And so they added a new alcove at the other end. They broke through the wall and they added an alcove. And when we did later reconstruction work, we found one of the boards, the carpenter, which happens a lot, the carpenter wrote his name and put the date, 4/17/1916. So we know the date that reconstruction work was done. And this became the new entranceway now into the schoolhouse, and the woodshed was gone on that. So that's kind of the change that takes place. Keep track of my slides here. So to finish just quickly the story of it, it stays in South Mashpee at the intersection of Red Brook and Great Oak up until 1953. And in 1953, New Seabury is beginning to buy up lots of land down in South Mashpee, including the property that the schoolhouse is on. Now, the good part of New Seabury owning it is that they used it to store fertilizer for their golf courses. The reason that is good is because to protect the fertilizer, they kept putting new roofs on, so the rain and stuff wouldn't get it. So it actually kind of saved the building because they wanted to protect their fertilizer. So by 1975, New Seabury is expanding and they want this building off their property, and they said to the town, do you want it? And the town said, well, yeah, this is one of the oldest buildings in Mashpee. Yes, we do. They said, well, it's yours, but you got to get it off the property. And so the town moves the schoolhouse from South Mashpee up to the old Indian burial ground by Meeting House Road and 28, where they put it. And so in 1975, it gets moved up there. Unfortunately, it just sat there. The highway department used it to put lawnmowers in. Unfortunately, raccoons got inside, all kinds of animals. The ants ate all the sills. We were going to lose the building. It was going to fall down. And so the Historical Commission is very concerned, and they get the Women's Club involved. And you can see the deterioration of the beams that was taking place and it was, as I said, really bad shape. And so Women's Club is going to do a fundraiser to raise $50,000 to help with the restoration. And so first they hire this gentleman, Robert Pritchard, to get the animals out of the schoolhouse. And so he goes in to get the raccoons and bats and whatnot out of there. And he's also a carpenter on the side and very interested in restoration. And he donates his services for nothing. He donates his services, and he says, wait a minute, we got to save this building. And he goes all throughout New England, the rotted boards and stuff that have to be replaced. He, from Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire, finds barns and other buildings that have beams and woods about the same date. And led by Sunny Merritt of the Women's Club, the lady on the right, they do indeed raise that $50,000. And then the Historical Commission goes to the town, and using community preservation funds, they chip in another $35,000. And we begin massive restoration of the one-room schoolhouse. And you can see large parts of it were replaced. Anything that could be saved was saved with that. You can see, for example, one of the original beams has the wood pegs that stick through. It still has the wood peg construction with that, versus a newer beam that he found that does not. So as you go into the school, you'll see a lot of, about 60% of the beams are original in the ceiling. Same with the floor, the wide pine floorboards that are there as well. And with the restoration, they were able to turn it into the school you see today. And the desks, by the way, were actually made by the students at Mashpee High School. They made the desks as a project. And you can see the interior of the school, and then in that alcove that the Baptists added, we have a display case that's in there and some information about the school that goes along. Well, when they finished the restoration in 1908, at about the same time, by the Archives building, which was the old library, those of you who have been here a long time, the library moved down to the beautiful library we have today, actually the second one, but in that same location. And so the old library was given to the Archives, the Historical Commission, to store all the records and history of Mashpee. And then in that, what was called Collins Field, they began to clear out. They put a gazebo in there, and they dressed it up, and they said, well, the school will get more attention and be more seen if it was moved down into this new community park. And so in 2008, this time they didn't have to use oxen and logs, but a truck. They actually brought the schoolhouse on its second move from the old Indian burial ground down to community park where it is today. And in keeping the tradition that Frank had started, every year we bring the third graders, all third graders come through. We give them what it was like going to school back in the 1840s. And the kids are great in there. They get to use the quill pens and ink. I tell them, are the computers on the desk? Well, no. So they use the quill pens and ink, and I say, well, which would you rather do? Write a 10-page paper with your quill pen and ink or the computer? And they're like, computer. But they actually do a very good job with, and we have them use the slate board. They do some math work. Each of those kids in the first, I'll just pass these, you can pass these around. In that first class, we were able to find out some information, and on the back, if you look on the back of each, there's some little history we were able to find. We even found the teacher, Minnie Baker, that actually eventually lived. She's buried now over in Falmouth. And now the schools then were called mixed schools, which meant that it had all ages from 5 to 14. So Beatrice de Grasse was the youngest at age 5 in 1900, that last class, and Blanche Pockneck was 14. She was the oldest. After 14, you were done. That was the end of school. You mentioned that you had the same teacher. The same teacher would stay until that teacher left. And if the older kids weren't doing anything, the teacher was working with the younger kids, the older kids would come over and try to help out a little bit as well. So we have a great time with the third graders, doing all kinds of little activities with them. What they do, we have, because the school is small, we can only hold like 12 in there, so we divide the class in half. So half go to the Wampanoag Museum, and they're there for about 40 minutes, and then they walk back, and the group that I had goes to the Wampanoag Museum. So the kids get both the schoolhouse and the Wampanoag Museum. And we actually have a thing now, they can go out on recess with the hoop and stick. It's hysterical watching them try to do the hoop and stick that's out there. So what we do is to try to give the kids a little look at what it was like going to school back in the 1840s, the 1850s. And I tell them, I said, teachers were very strict back then. The school day went from 9 to 4. But at 10 minutes to 9, the schoolmaster would ring the school bell, letting the kids know they have 10 minutes to get there. Because for every 5 minutes that they were late, they had to stay after school 1 hour. So the kids going, So you can imagine if you heard that school bell, you're running as fast as you can, because if you're after school for that hour, you're an hour late coming home. Your parents are not going to be happy campers at all, because they're doing the chores that you're supposed to be doing, and you're in big trouble. And we line the kids up by age when they come in, and they have to bow and say, "Good morning, schoolmaster," and they have to sit in their seats with their hands folded, their backs against the back of the bench, their seat on the floor, except for some of the younger ones don't quite reach. And they have to be quiet when they're sitting there. They're very, very strict. So what were the rules back then? Well, first for teachers, as the schoolmaster, my job would be to come early and fill the lantern. Now, we're at Mashpee on the Cape, so in the early years, it would have been whale oil. Whaling is that's a whole other topic, a great whaling history that's here on the Cape and in Mashpee. And my other job would be to get the wood out of the woodshed, get the stove, in the wintertime, get the stove going so that when the kids came in, it was nice and warm inside. I'd also make sure all the quill pens were sharp. Now, for every 10 hours of schoolwork that for every 10 hours on schoolwork, I could then spend the remaining time of my day at home reading the Bible or other good books. Women teachers who married or engaged in unseemly conduct were dismissed. Every teacher should set aside from each of my pay a goodly sum for my benefits during my declining years, so that I would not become a burden on society. Any teacher who smoked, used liquor in any form, frequented the pool or public halls, got a shave in the barber shop, would be given good reason to suspect his worth, intention, integrity, and honesty.
What did that have to do with barber shops?
Well, barber shops then were very seedy places. It was the ruffians that hung around the barber shop, and God knows what you heard when you were on that chair.
They played cards.
Oh, it was, and there was pools there too. And now the teacher who performed his duty faithfully, without fail for 5 years, will be given an increase of 25 cents per week in his pay, providing that the Board of Education approved it. Now, for students, first of all, my job also was to every day inspect the neck, the ears, and the fingernails of every kid prior to start of class to make sure they were clean. If not, they were sent home. Girls could never show a bare ankle, and girls and boys' clothing always had to cover their arms and legs. If you look at some of the pictures, I guess the top ones, you'll notice that the kids, their sleeves and their pants cover, let's get back to them, cover their legs and arms completely. Even in the summertime. So you could not have your arms or legs or ankles be seen. That would be immoral. Oh, they'd have a heart attack today. Let's get back. So then I say to the kids, how is this school different from your school in the Quashnet? And they would say such things as, well, there's no electricity. I say, okay. That they would use the lanterns, which were probably hung on the walls. As you know, especially in the wintertime, school goes to 2 to 3 o'clock, especially on a cloudy, snowy day. It gets dark in there. There's just the 4 windows that are in there. Their job also, they would ask, how do you heat? And of course, the heat is coming from the wood-burning stove. We put a replica in the back of the schoolhouse. That would not be original, but just give you an idea that it was heated by wood. Then, of course, they say, well, there's no bathroom here. Well, they would have had an outhouse. There would have been an outhouse located a short distance away from the school. And we know there was an outhouse in the school because in the 1889 town report, the town votes $2.87 to repair the South School outhouse. So we know that we did have an outhouse. And then I said to the kids, well, is there a bubbler or a drinking fountain here? And they said, well, no. Well, how would you drink? They come up with all kinds of responses. But I would fill, in South Mashpee, there is a spring, not too far from where the school was. And so probably from that spring they got fresh water. But wherever, if there was a brook or a pond nearby, the schoolmaster's job would be to provide water. And then I say, you would all drink out of the one cup. And they all go, oh. I say, well, what's it out? Here, germs. I said, well, they didn't really know a lot about germs back then. It's not like they were stupid. It's just we didn't have a lot of that knowledge. I played football, and we used to have a pail with a ladle, and we all drank out of that. Somehow we survived onto that. So that's a little bit, we tell the kids, a little bit of what the school day would be like. And then I tell them, is anyone here left-handed? Oh, you're in trouble. They would not let you write with your left hand back then. And there was a stick, and I have this little stick. They would whack your hand to prevent you. Now, my father was left-handed. He went to Boston public schools. He could not write with his left hand. They would whack his hand, which is why he had terrible penmanship, horrible. And one of the teachers, one of the third grade teachers, said that her grandmother, she said, they actually tied the left hand behind her back so that she couldn't use it to write. Just kind of a bizarre. Thankfully, we no longer do that. And then I tell them if they threw anything in class, they got 5 whacks with the rod. If they swore, they were suspended. If they carved on the desks or the woodwork, they were expelled. And any fighting, lying, or cheating, they were expelled from school. So they were indeed very strict. So that's a little bit of the history of the school and what went on. The thing I think that makes this building so special is the history tie it has with the town of Mashpee and with the Wampanoag tribe. Just a little background. In 1746, Mashpee was a plantation, is put in what's called a district. The state appoints 3 white overseers to be totally in charge of running the district of Mashpee. Unfortunately, most of them could care less about the local population. Some of them never even came down to Mashpee. And what they began to do is they began to lease out the hay fields, the timber, the fishing rights to make money for themselves as well. So the local Wampanoag population was not getting any benefit of their own resources. And they kept petitioning, and we have drawers full of petitions you could look at of over and over again appealing to the state legislature, will you help us? Will you stop? You're basically putting us into total poverty. We're not existing. These 3 white overseers are not in our best interest, and nothing. And finally, this is a great story. You're going to think I'm making it up, but it's actually a true story. It almost sounds like, if you remember, Gulliver's Travel. But there was this Wampanoag by the name of Reuben Cognew. And Reuben Cognew was so fed up with the state legislature not listening. Of course, we're still part of Great Britain then. He says, I'm going directly to the king. So he goes to Providence, makes arrangement with a ship captain in Providence to take him over to England. The ship captain agrees. However, he gets out off the coast and they chain him up. They're going to take him down into the West Indies and sell him as a slave. They get off the coast of the Bahamas and they get hit by this massive hurricane. Smashes the ship to bits. The people make it to shore somehow. And after a short time there, Reuben then makes arrangement with another British ship captain to take him to England. This time the guy actually does take him to England. And what is more incredible, he actually gets an audience with the new King George III. And he presents this petition to King George III about what the conditions are in Mashpee. Well, the king gets word back to the governor of Massachusetts, what is going on in your colony? We got these Wampanoags coming all the way from Mashpee, all the way to England with petitions. Will you do something? Get your house in order. And so the governor forms this commission to come down to study conditions here in Mashpee. And they come back, they say, he's right. He's right. The conditions are horrible. And so in 1763, they do away with the 3 white overseers, and they come in with 5 overseers. However, 3 of them can be elected by the local Wampanoag population. So now they got majority. They can outvote. Of course, the one who handled all the finances and the town treasurer had to be appointed by the governor. However, the 3, now they can decide who gets the timberland and who gets the hayfields and the fishing rights. And for the first time, they have some autonomy that's there. And things are looking pretty good from their point of view. Then, as you know, 1775, 1776, the American Revolution breaks out. And if you look, if you've had a chance, if you haven't, to go down to the community park, the new war memorial that's there, it lists all the names of those that served in the different wars from the Revolutionary War through Vietnam. Well, there's 62 names. Now, the population of Mashpee, there's only 300. There's 62 names of Wampanoags, predominantly Wampanoags, that take part in the American Revolutionary War. And I'll give you some stats there. The states of Massachusetts and Connecticut had the highest percent of any of the 13 states that fought in the Continental Army. 1 out of every 7 of population. Mashpee has 1 out of every 5. Sandwich is full of Tories. You don't see that here. And so the question always becomes, why does Mashpee respond so much, so patriotic during the Revolutionary War? Well, my answer used to be, well, one, they had freedom for the first time, and they enjoyed it, they liked it, they saw the value of it. This new United States was saying all people are created equal. I think we're going to do better under this new United States than we've done under Great Britain. But then I talked to a couple of Wampanoags and said, you know, a Wampanoag boy growing up is a warrior. And they're trained, they're ingrained to fight for their land, to fight to protect their homeland. And here's something that, when this war broke out, they were ingrained to do. So I thought that was kind of an interesting response. But Mashpee has this tremendous response, and 15 end up dying during the war. And we have, if you go there, there's in the Veterans Garden, there's the 15 stones, all Wampanoags, who died fighting for this new United States. So once the war is over, they still have their autonomy. But what I need to tell you, what's my time thing here? Because
You're doing well.
I'm okay? All right. I tend to go on and on. I'm okay. Just give me a signal when you want to shut me up here. Mashpee was put under a series of ministers who were paid to come down here to Christianize the indigenous population that was here. And there was a fund that was set up, originally under Great Britain, and then after the Revolution, Harvard took it over. It was called the Williams Fund. And money was to pay for the ministers. Well, here in New England, we were all Congregationalists back then. So we had Congregationalist ministers come down here. And in large part, the local Wampanoag population were Christianized, which is why when the King Philip War broke out in 1675, Mashpee does not really take part with the other Native Americans fighting on the side of Metacomet and during the King Philip War. And part of that was because they had been Christianized and under kind of white influence. Also, we were a little distant, being on the Cape, cut off a little bit, but they are Christianized by and large. And the ministers that come down now, in fairness, some of these ministers were great, and they dealt with the spiritual needs of the local population. And some of them were actually Wampanoags. And many began to actually have the services in the local Wampanoag language. Until we get after the Revolutionary War, we have two ministers that come in, this Reverend Gideon Hawley and then Reverend Phineas Fish, who really, in quite honesty, did not have the spiritual needs of the Wampanoags in their best interest. They got the money. They were given a parsonage and 450 acres of land. They were using all the timber on that land to sell to make additional money for themselves with that, and not really dealing with all the concerns that the Wampanoags have. Well, now after the Revolutionary War, the Wampanoags having this autonomy with the 3 out of the 5 overseers they can elect, the ministers see they've lost a lot of their power and influence. They don't like it. And they get word back to the governor that the Wampanoags, this is not working out. The Wampanoags are not running the town correctly. We need to go back to the 3 white overseers. They're not running things directly. And so in 1788, they do away with the autonomy and they go back to the 3 white overseers. So here's the Wampanoag population that fought and died in the Revolutionary War fighting, and the end result is they lose their autonomy. The 3 white overseers take over again. They lose all control. And the other thing, the white ministers, how many are familiar with the meeting house at the old Indian burial ground? That was the Wampanoags built. That was their meeting house. Well, both under Reverend Gideon Hawley and Phineas Fish, they are just preaching in English. And pretty soon, the local Wampanoags are not even attending, and a lot of whites from Sandwich and Barnstable and Falmouth begin attending. And so basically, the Wampanoags are locked out of their own meeting house. And so they also kind of lose that. And so this gentleman here, Joe Amos, who is blind from almost birth, and his mother every day reads passages of the Bible to him every day. So by the time he's in his 20s, he can recite large parts of the Bible by heart because he can't read. And because the Congregationalists controlled the meeting house, blind Joe Amos, this new Baptist faith, is making inroads into New England. He becomes a Baptist. In fact, he becomes the first ordained Baptist minister here in Mashpee. And he begins preaching. He doesn't have a place to preach because they're locked out of their own meeting house. So he begins to preach under the trees down in South Mashpee, under the oak trees and scrub pines down there. But in bad weather, he's in the one-room schoolhouse. He begins to preach in the one-room schoolhouse. So the schoolhouse takes on kind of a spiritual founding as well. So he's preaching, and he's getting a large audience of the Native Americans, Wampanoags, that are now going to his services, which is interesting because if you look at large numbers of Wampanoags today are Baptists. And you can trace that all the way back to blind Joe Amos because they couldn't get into the Congregational church, and so they're with the Baptists with that. And so he's preaching, and this gentleman comes into the scene. An amazing guy, William Apis is his name. He's a Pequot Native American. He becomes an ordained Methodist minister, and he really gets into Native American rights. There's a couple of books you can take out on him in the library. It's fascinating, his background. But I tell the kids, he to Native American rights is what Martin Luther King would be to civil rights of African Americans. That's how strong William Apis was. And he's fighting for Native American rights. And he comes into Boston and he meets with William Lloyd Garrison. William Lloyd Garrison is the great abolitionist at that time. And when he's up into Boston, he's hearing all these things about these abuses down in Mashpee and the lack of rights. And so he comes down here to Mashpee and he ties up with blind Joe Amos. And he too preaches in the one-room schoolhouse. And after a while, he says, wait a minute, this is crazy. This is crazy. You guys need to declare your independence. You need to break away and form your own entity, Mashpee, declare your independence. And so in the spring of 1833, they draw up what becomes known as a Declaration of Independence that basically says three things. One, we're going to run our own government. We're going to decide. Two, we're going to be the ones who decide what happens to our hay fields, our fishing rights, our timber. And number three, we want our meeting house back. And starting July 1, this declaration is going into effect. We're giving you notice. So May, June, we got 2 months, 2.5 months notice. The petition is sent to the governor, surrounding towns. Whether they took them serious or not, I don't know. But come July 1, a couple of farmers from Barnstable come into Mashpee, cut trees down, start loading their wagon up, and William Apis and a group of Wampanoags come out and say, not happening. And they take all the wood out of the wagon and they send the farmers back to Barnstable. They run to the overseers that say, the overseers race to the governor and says, the Wampanoags are in revolt. The governor says he's going to send down 1,500 armed troops to crush the revolt. This is ludicrous. The population's only 300. They have old hunting weapons at best. Luckily, calmer heads prevail. And instead, the governor sends down this Joshua Fiske, F-I-S-K-E, as a negotiator. He was with the executive council with the governor. And he meets with the Wampanoags. He says, look, withdraw your Declaration of Independence. Withdraw that. I'll go back, work with the legislature, and we'll get you your autonomy back again. Well, in the meantime, William Apis, they put on trial. He gets a heavy fine, and he has to serve 30 days in jail for taking the wood out of the Barnstable farmer's wagon that's there. And that Declaration of Independence was signed by 102 Wampanoags. We have their names listed there. They signed that declaration in the one-room schoolhouse. That's kind of like Mashpee's Independence Hall. That's there. This declaration was signed in the one-room schoolhouse. That's there. And so, true to his word, Fisk goes back and he works with the legislature, and by the Acts of 1834, the white overseers are done away with, and Mashpee now has three, basically become selectmen, three overseers that all are elected by the local population. So very similar to having three select board members or three selectmen. And so starting in 1834, because of the actions of William Apis and Blind Joe Amos and a number of the Wampanoags, they're back to having autonomy again, total control of their own property. But they still have a problem. The problem is Reverend Phineas Fish won't leave the meeting house. He refuses to leave. And so it takes several years before they're able, at one time they actually broke in through the windows, changed the locks, locked it so he couldn't get back in. Finally, the state tells him, we're cutting off the Williams Fund unless you get out. And that makes him decide. He goes over to Cotuit, starts his own church over in Cotuit. He's actually buried in the cemetery over there in Cotuit. So the Wampanoags finally get control of their meeting house once again with that. One of the things the Act does, now there's 12,000 acres of common land here in Mashpee. Now the Wampanoags didn't have the land ownership as we think of it, you know, with our own deeds and fences and our property and everything. So they said, wait a minute, we're going to divide that. We're going to divide that common land up. We're going to give every resident 60 acres of land is how it divided out. So every resident was given 60 acres of land. That chewed up 10,000 acres, which left 2,000 of town or common land that was left. The stipulation was you could only sell to another proprietor, another Wampanoag. So the land stayed always within. The Wampanoags were land rich but very poor money-wise. And the fear was there was large people, very wealthy, come in and just buy everything else. Well, this protected that. So now we get into the 1860s, late 1860s. Mashpee's the only place in Massachusetts that's not an official town, an incorporated town. It's a district. And there's pressure to become a town, pressure put on to become a town. And there's a split. There's many of the Wampanoags who feel it would be a good thing. There's a lot of advantages. But first of all, the Wampanoags could not vote in state or federal elections. On the other hand, they didn't have to pay taxes. They had their land, but they could only sell it to another proprietor. So they couldn't get somebody really high amounts of money. They couldn't do that. So there was debate within the Wampanoag community. And so state legislature comes down here and they hold a number of hearings. And they're debating this. And on the issue of whether or not to get the right to vote but then be taxed, it actually came out a tie vote of those who showed up at the meeting. But on the issue of giving up the land and being able to sell it freely, it's overwhelmingly defeated. The legislature hearings go back. The state still decides we're still going to make you a town. And so in 1870, Mashpee is incorporated as an official town here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Within 20 years, about 70% of the land in Mashpee is now controlled by those outside Mashpee. Big money comes in, you're very poor, you sell a lot of your land, and the local Wampanoags lose a large percent of their land that wealthy whites come in and buy. It doesn't impact the running of the government because most of those that come down are just here for the summer. And so the running of the government remains in the Wampanoag hands, and that stays that way right up into the 1960s. And it's not till the 1960s that many want to stay here year-round, and pretty soon the non-Wampanoag population outnumbers the Wampanoag population, and pretty soon they are the ones elected to select board members and running the town, and the Wampanoags lose a lot of that control. And Mashpee, as you know, by the 70s becomes one of the fastest growing towns in the United States. In 1960, the population is a little over 700. And then now we're up to 18,000 year round. It jumps to what, 40,000 or something in the summer. You know, a huge population jump. So we become an official town, and the name, which often was spelled with the R, M-A-R-S-H, Mashpee, officially becomes Mashpee. Now, my wife always claims it's because of the Boston accent. That's not true. But we become officially, Mashpee becomes the official name on that. And just to end my talk here, the display case, we have a number of different books that date from that time period that have the actual bark and the tree wood on the outside, and some of the real old slates that were there. During the Reconstruction, they actually found a spitball in the wall that some kid, so I'm guessing that discipline was not always that strict, but we actually have the spitball that was removed, so you can view that. And we have some of the cut nails and stuff that were on the original roof. And when the schoolhouse was moved to the old Indian burial ground, it was put on the National Register of Historic Places, along with the meeting house and the burial grounds. 2008, we moved the schoolhouse to a new location. The state now says, well, you now have to reapply, even though you used to be an historic building. Now, because you were moved, so we're in the process now of reapplying to get back our status of being a building in the National Register of Historic Places. But it is one of the gems of the town of Mashpee. I appreciate your support when you guys came to visit. We're open from Memorial Day to Indigenous People Day. This year we expanded to 3 days a week. However, starting this past Monday, because kids and stuff are back into school, we're now going to be open 5 days a week on an appointment schedule. So I have my email, so you can call anytime, Monday to Friday. If you want to bring your family down, we'll work on your schedule so that we're not sitting with no one coming in. We'll work when the population will do that. But we have people every year from all over the world. This year we had some people from Germany. We had some people from Sweden that came in. We have all over Massachusetts, or California. We had someone from Arizona that are visiting. Plus we have the local people from Mashpee who always say, I've been here 30 years and I've never been inside the school, and they come in. So thank you for your past support, and thanks for listening today. Thank you.